Welcome, brothers and sisters. Did you know that a popular fan theory is that Winston's friend Syme was not vaporized when he disappeared, but was rather promoted into the inner party? The theory generally goes that Syme's elevation would have seen him receive a new identity and perhaps a full transfer either to another province or perhaps another city within Airstrip 1. In the past, I've offered law answers as to why I don't think this is the case. Yet today I'll don my own tinfoil hat and make an argument for the theory based on the law. The first point is on the process or description of elevation to begin with. As you may recall from previous videos or reading the book, entry into either branch of the party is for examination at the age of 16, which seemingly precludes Syme's elevation, given he is clearly much older than this, and presumably didn't meet the grade when he was 16. However, if we examine this part of the book closely, it's not close to this information in terms of sentencing to when Goldstein's book explains that a certain amount of interchange is permitted between the branches of the party. This is actually rather ambiguous, as is a lot of information about the world, and this can be read as interchange apart from the previous selection process rather than its sole mechanism. That there are examinations at 16 and that there are cases of post-16 exclusion or elevation are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Indeed, since we know that children and young adults develop at different rates, 16 may be too young for such a determination to be permanent in all cases. It's certainly not impossible that an individual later demonstrates the character and ambition required for membership long after their 16th year. This brings us neatly to the next pillar of support for the theory, Syme's own character. His age is not clearly stated, so technically he could be far younger than Winston. Indeed, in the Fido Nesti graphic novel, he is depicted as fairly young. Age aside, however, perhaps youth is not an overriding factor anyway. Syme certainly does qualify on the orthodoxy front, at least on a surface level, seemingly fully devoted to the principles of Ingsoc, Doublethink and Big Brother. Syme is also very intelligent, something that is likely a qualifier for entry on the basis of their work. As administrators of provinces and policymakers, it requires a certain base level of intelligence, even for the lowest of them, to do their jobs effectively. Our only active model of an inner party member, O'Brien, is certainly intelligent himself, perhaps the most intelligent character in the book, aside from likely non-existent characters. Another supporting dimension is Syme's evident hatred and relish of the destruction of enemies. Quote, Syme was venomously orthodox. He would talk with a disagreeable gloating satisfaction of helicopter raids on enemy villages, and trials and confessions of thought criminals, the executions in the cellars of the Ministry of Love. If we take this at face value and contrast this with what we learn in Goldstein's book about the general character of an inner party member, quote, it is in the ranks of the party, and above all the inner party, that the true war enthusiasm is found. World conquest is believed in most firmly by those who know it to be impossible. It goes without saying too that later on in part 3 we learn a lot about the character of the inner party member, so far as O'Brien reflects it, when he explains to Winston about the world that they are creating, how their own drama will be played out again and again over the coming centuries. This certainly sounds very reminiscent of the same lunatic enthusiasm we see in Syme too. The only thing missing, or at least not overtly mentioned as such, is ambition. The interchange sentence talks about allowing the particularly ambitious to rise. I think it's probably more apt to say that at best, this is left neutral. Syme doesn't signal an overt ambition to rise, though perhaps his enthusiasm in explaining the real purpose behind Newspeak could be construed as a showboating of a kind, a way of advertising that he's with the program, so to speak. Moving on, even the change of idea actually does have some indirect support in the law. Though part of O'Brien's deception in his meeting with Winston and Julia, he does explain how Brotherhood members can be changed. Quote, we may be obliged to give him a new identity, his face, his movements, the shape of his hands, the colour of his hair, Even his voice would be different, and you yourself might have become a different person. Our surgeons can alter people beyond recognition. Sometimes it is necessary. Sometimes we even amputate a limb. Detractors may hit back that everything said by O'Brien is a lie, but I wouldn't be so sure. I suspect that much of what O'Brien in the Thought Police says likely has elements of truth in it. Indeed, if we think about it, it's actually quite difficult to speak in complete fabrications all of the time. They say that the greatest lies often have a core of truth to them. We know this to be true to an extent too, as O'Brien admits later on that Goldstein's book itself, although written by him and his colleagues, is actually true as description. The fantastic elements of it, at least from their perspective, were in the plans to overthrow the party through the gathering of secret knowledge, and finally a proletarian revolt. In the same way then, O'Brien's words in the meeting could have been quite true as description, if not really ever put into practice in the Brotherhood, or at least his version of it anyway. The party itself probably could so completely change a person's identity if so desired. It would certainly have the access to the best surgeons and technology to do this. Given this, the idea of Syme accepting promotion on the basis of completely shedding his former identity is not that far-fetched. The penultimate point I'll discuss is Winston's character, or rather his own track record of judgments. Winston is certainly not some infallible judge of character or events. His biggest error was in initially getting his suspicions about the two people he most cared about the wrong way around. Julia was not an amateur spy, and O'Brien was not a secret opponent of the party. Winston's prediction that Parsons would not be vaporized, and that he was a man of paralyzing stupidity, are also unlikely. Parsons was arrested for apparent opposition by saying "down with Big Brother," and was perhaps not so devoted or stupid as first supposed. Given these errors of character judgment, is it that fanciful to suppose that Winston's analysis of Syme could also be flawed? Rather is Winston's belief that Syme would be vaporized, and that his disappearance equates to such ironclad truths. A final piece of support for the theory is that disappearance does not always mean vaporization. Indeed, Winston himself says as much when he states that many disappearances were in fact suicides. Julia confirms that suicide certainly happens, with her first lover having offed himself to avoid capture. Interestingly too, we know from the aforementioned that reassignment is at least mechanically possible. Though part of O'Brien's deception, given the party's power and resources, perhaps totally reassigning individuals with new identities is a thing, or at least could be done in some cases. Other less likely explanations for disappearances are escape and defection. Again, though a lie, the supposed collaboration of Jones, Aronson and Rutherford with members of the Eurasian High Command show that the party at least sees such a thing as possible, or believable at least. Defection of valuable inner party members could therefore be a thing on occasion, and perhaps even particularly skilled or valuable outer party members. Escape, while highly dangerous and unlikely, must also happen sometimes. While destinations are limited, there are likely relatively okay places to go, at least for a while, sparsely populated or wilderness areas. What is also undeniably true, given the nature of the party and Thought Police, is that in any scenario, including even promotion, any disappearance would effectively be considered vaporization. Although this does beg a final question: why cover up such a promotion if Syme was raised to the inner party? Well, I have a couple of reasons. Firstly, the inner party is secretive by nature. They are not overly concerned with fame or notoriety, but solely with power. Indeed, one function of Big Brother is to act in this role as public face of the party and state. Winston himself describes the members of the inner party as anonymous directing brains, and their numbers are relatively few, with only O'Brien making an active appearance in the plot, and even then only prominently so in Part 3. All this suggests that publicising such promotions, or even allowing others to know it's happened, is likely not an option, hence the need to be reassigned and perhaps have a new identity that the new member would have to fully embrace, which should be easy enough for a man like Syme, with his perfect grasp of doublethink and mental self-control. In addition, aside from the secrecy dimension, to admit an adult has been promoted also admits that the party made an error in not promoting them at 16. The party, specifically the inner party, in such rare cases, probably gets around this uncomfortable fact for effective vaporization of the old persona of the promoted comrade. The party made no error in not recognizing Syme's worth before now, as there is no Syme. This comrade now exists, and has always existed. So that's my case anyway for Syme's promotion to the inner party. Are you convinced? Could Syme and other outer party members before him have been promoted into the inner party and given totally new identities? Tell us all your thoughts in the comments section. And remember, we are the dead. Our only true life is in the future. We shall take part in it as handfuls of dust and splinters of bone.